Okay, with about 6.5 hours left of the Monday session, Bitcoin in the daily time frame here, we see it selling off 3.32% at the moment, back down below 100,000. It popped back above it. Now, as what we've seen is we saw this triangle. We saw a drop of 9%. Bounced off the 20-period moving average. We rallied up. We went sideways, bounced off the 20-period again. When I was making the video right here, we were attempting to, I talked about this triangle, we were attempting to actually break out of it towards the end of that video. We ended up doing that. The very next day with the session started, we rallied up nearly 5% on Bitcoin. And then we dropped back down and ended up dropping back down from that high, just over 11%, almost 11.25%. We moved up off of the lows with this tail back above the lower boundary of the triangle, back above the 20, back above the 10. And then, again, that created a little back test on the 4-hour chart. And then, again, rallied up, but couldn't push above this high right here at the 104,000 area. And now we're pulling back, dropping back below after getting above 100,000, now dropping over the weekend again here on a closing basis. Now we're dropping back down below it. Here we are at the 10 and the 20, and again, the upper boundary of this triangle. So that's what's going on right now. We're down, again, 3.29% at the moment. Now, we have stalled at some trend lines of resistance in the weekly time frame, and we do have a divergence from the peak over here to the peak over here on a closing basis in the daily time frame. The question is, does that stall prices at the trend line in the weekly time frame, or do we pull back and eventually clear that level and go up to the upper boundary of the channel, which I think is probably going to be the case. Short-term channel I've been talking about in the weekly time frame. Again, I talked about the breakout of the triangle, and then I talked about the back test, and we overthrew this level. We got a bottoming tail here in the 4-hour time frame, and we have pushed back above the triangle, the upper boundary of the triangle, didn't move to a new high, and then now we've got this retesting of the upper boundary once again. Also, we're testing our 50-period moving average, a cloud here, but the 50-period moving average and that in the 4-hour time frame, and our 10-period moving average in the daily time frame. So I'm watching to see if we could still reach that upper boundary of the channel, which I think is the likely scenario going forward. We go higher on the 4-hour chart. Do we form a divergence here? Now, so far we've gotten a lower high from this peak right here. We had a divergence over here that gave us the 9% sell-off that ended up, correcting sideways, forming the triangle. Do we end up pushing higher? And if we do, again, looking at those trend lines I've been showing you in the weekly time frame with the linear scaling on the log scaling, those are the blow-off top targets. The question is, once we reach those levels, do we just get a corrective move and continue the bull market, or is that all she wrote? And again, that could be all she wrote once we reach these next levels of resistance, if we can do it, if we can clear our current level, because again, we are stalling at a level of resistance right now in the weekly time frame. Looking for clues, but again, we know that recession is likely going to hit in the first or second quarter. From the triggering of the Psalm rule, 6 months is January, 9 months is April. It's likely we're going to see the recession hit in that window. Before the recession hits, the stock market is likely to peak, which I think you got a good shot of that happening in December or January. The same thing with Bitcoin, a good shot that it will peak in December or January, ahead of the recession. Now, the conventional wisdom is we're not going to have a recession. We're going to have this soft landing. The Psalm rule's been triggered, which is moving average of the unemployment rate. And again, this thing's not been wrong. Decades it has correctly called recession after recession. It's not going to be wrong this time. That's why I say Powell's going to end up doing an emergency cut right now. We're going to get a 0.25% cut in December, and then the Fed's going to pause because the economy's so wonderful. That's the narrative right now. We're going to see inflation tick back up like it did in 2007, and the Fed is still going to cut despite inflation rising because the recession is on the horizon. Once the Fed figures out that we'll already be in the recession, that's what usually happens. They're blindsided by it because they believe their own soft landing fairy tale. So again, I'm going to be watching, do we get more divergences on the MACD and the RSI right here in the 4-hour time frame? And do we see pring parameter turn back up and form a larger divergence? That very well could be the case, but again, I'll be watching to see, do we find support here at the upper boundary of the triangle or the apex, or do we drop back down to test the low of the 9% sell-off or the 200 period moving average? Again, I still think that upper channel is likely to be reached. Now, we are stalling. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel. Today, I don't have any sponsors, just a direct relationship with you. So if you could take a moment to help out, I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your consideration for that. Again, we've had the dollar break out in the weekly time frame and back test this trend line, breakout, back test at key support, the 200-week moving average. We broke this trend line, and then we broke above horizontal resistance, very similar to what we had back over here when Bitcoin topped. Again, the dollar is surging, and so is Bitcoin. One of them is wrong. Bitcoin is to continue longer-term bull market. The dollar has to come back and collapse below the 200-week moving average here, and then stay below it, and not be breaking out and back testing and moving to new highs. So again, one of them is wrong. Which is wrong, the dollar or Bitcoin? Everybody dismissed back at the 2021 top. Everybody dismissed the dollar breakout. Led to a 78.5% drop on Bitcoin. Led to a top on Bitcoin. Will that be the same here at some of the trend lines I'm showing you? Potential target level for a blow-off top. Now, right now, we're stalling at this trend line right here. We have these trend lines. Again, I drew a trend line from the two peaks in 2021. We overthrew that. And then again, I drew a trend line from this low to the lows here, excluding the shadow, and we came right up and we stalled up that trend line, at least so far. So you got to be able to clear that trend line if we're going to go to the upper boundary of the channel. But right now we're stalling right there, at least so far. So we're watching this level closely. These are the target levels. I talked about these trend line right here from these peaks over here before we ever broke out over here as a potential area. We've actually overthrown that and gotten to this trend line. Back over here at 69,000, when we reached just under 69,000 there, I talked about the top over here, that these lows are pointing to the next high. See the same thing here if we can't clear this area, but I think you got a pretty good shot. You're going to try to reach the upper boundary of the channel line, so we still may get above this area, but it's an important level that if we do stall here, this trend line is resistance now at this point. And clear it, we've got the upper channel, which if we cleared this trend line from the 2021 low, it would take us up to this upper channel line, depending on when we reach that. But again, right now, currently, if we reach it sooner rather than later, you're looking at, again, between about 11,000 and 15,000. Again, the further right you go to the chart, the higher the trend line goes. Around the 10,000 area last week, the previous 2 weeks, and now it's risen up towards about 11,000 to 15,000 or so. And again, could rise as high as 20,000, as I've said. But this is a channel I'm looking at. Should we be able to clear this trend line right here from the 2021 low? So these are the target levels where prices could stall. Right now, we're stalling right here. This could be it, but if we clear it, then again, the upper channel line comes into play. Now here's a channel just by itself on Bitcoin, and again, recently we broke out of that channel that we were in for about 8 months or so. So again, I think that you got a pretty good shot. We're going to try to move to this upper boundary right here, and again, this is just a parallel channel from these lows over here, excluding the shadow, from this peak here and here, excluding the shadow over here. So that's where I think we're likely headed, and that could take us again towards the 11 to 15,000 area, depending on when we reach it. Should we do that here in December or January, this is where I think we're likely headed. Had a nice channel here. Here we broke this downtrend and we back tested it right there. And I've taken the new channel from these lows over here and parallel boundary from these highs. So this is where I think we're likely headed, but we got to be able to clear that other trend line I showed you from the 2021 low. So we got to be able to clear that area and again be able to go to the next level of resistance with Bitcoin, which would again be towards the 15,000 area or slightly underneath it. Again, assuming we can clear this trend line and we don't stall at it and reverse, assuming we can clear this trend line, we have this one in the log scaling, but we also, for the upper boundary of the channel here, we also have a longer term trend line in the linear time frame, linear scaling, I should say. And that is in the weekly time frame. This trend line that goes back to 2017, again, connecting it to the 2021 peaks right here, excluding the shadow here, including the shadow from the peak at 69,000. And if you go up, again, it's directly overhead. Again, depending on when we come into contact with it. We do it sooner rather than later. You're looking at maybe 106, 107,000 to just a little bit longer, maybe 108, 109, 110,000. If we overthrow it, though, if we hit it sooner rather than later and overthrow it, then you have that trend line with the log scaling in the weekly time frame. So just some target levels that I'm looking at, some important trend lines in the weekly time frame, targets for a potential blow off top. Again, we've had an explosive move higher. It could result, if the recession hits, first or second quarter, could result in a blow off top, stalling in these areas. Now, again, in order for Bitcoin to have a bull market going into 2025 and 2026, we need to somehow magically dodge a recession. Again, the SOM roll's been triggered, an inverting of the yield curve, seen the breakout of the dollar, but the recession indicators are suggesting, again, recession is going to start. Likelihood in the first or second quarter, it's going to be really hard for Bitcoin to have a bull market in 2025 if that's the case. Never had a recession, and that's what people are overlooking. We've never had a recession except the one that lasted very briefly, where we had huge government intervention, really gave us the inflation that we currently have. Fed intervened with QE 2.0, I should say, and all these things created the inflation. So the Fed may do QE later on. They would likely be scared to do it. They'll cut rates, but they'd be scared to do the QE. It was inflationary. And the government intervention that we really should have had back in 2020, we're going to have now. Bitcoin's never been through a long recessionary period. That's why I talk about the stock market. If the stock market peaks ahead of the recession, Bitcoin is likely going to do so as well. So we're looking, but like I said, my signals remain bullish. Bitcoin could go a lot higher. I'm just showing you target levels here that we may see prices stall out if we can clear this 104,000 area that we are turning off of here at the moment. So the trend line here from 2017 in the linear, with the linear scaling here in the weekly time frame. Some trend lines I'm watching for a potential completion of the blow off top. Now, I've talked about this triple divergence forming, and maybe it's done at that trend line. Again, I need to see more evidence of that. I still think we're going to go up to that upper channel line in all likelihood, but we could get a bigger pullback here, or just a mild pullback, and continue onward and upward. But we do have potentially the divergence completed here. It could be that the RSI is not done yet. It still may come up here and do something like that. So again, keep that in mind. We may just be getting a pullback, and then it still may go on higher, and we still may see another reference point of a divergence above the 104,000 peak over here, just under 104,000 here at this high when we first broke above 100,000 last Thursday. We could see upper channel target reached of the on the weekly chart that I've been showing you here in this video and have been showing you in each video. This may not be done, so I'm watching for clues. But if we stall at the trend line from the 2020 low in the weekly time frame I've talked about, then again, this might be now complete. So we're looking for clues. I've put a dotted line here because I'm uncertain whether my divergence is complete here at the one trend line from the 2021 low, or if we're just building momentum to try to clear it, and eventually we do and go to the upper channel. I still think you got a good shot at Bitcoin reaching that upper channel, to the 115,000 or just under it or just over it or so, the channel that I've been talking about in the weekly time frame. We have the MACD still below the signal line. I'm watching to see, do we end up seeing the MACD turn back above the signal line eventually, or again, does this end up leading to a bigger correction, or maybe even a reversal, and that's all she wrote. So we're looking for clues, but I told you I was looking for a new high here to form a divergence. It is present. Whether it's done or not, I can't tell you with certainty. Can't tell you what I think, and I think we still probably reach that upper channel line that I've shown you weekly time frame in all likelihood. S&P is just shy of its upper channel line in the weekly time frame. The Dow and the Russell, they've hit theirs. Some things to be paying attention to here with Bitcoin. And these divergences have marked turning points. So again, we had this divergence give us the 9% sell-off back to the 20-period moving average. But I told you I thought we'd see a triple divergence. Very well may not be done yet. We'll be looking for clues. Now, if the RSI starts dropping below 50, look at right here. After we hit the 100-period moving average and the 50 right here, got back above the, bounced off the 50 and the 100, got back above the 200. RSI moved back into positive territory. It held above 50 right here on this pullback right here, found support at the 20, and this one right here with the breakout and the back test again held support right there at the 50. It's been above the 50 level. So again, if we're going to turn, the RSI would have to drop back below 50. And just quickly, some of the Bitcoin charts I'm looking at. Here's a daily chart. We're having the sell-off. We'll be watching to see if the momentum line here turns bearish. If it does, then we can get a sell-off. Remember, we had it go back and forth here during the triangle. The formation of the triangle signals went back and forth. So again, I'll be watching that. There's a couple of X's here saying possible short-term peak here. Again, this just looks like short-term momentum. But no other signals, no other T or anything like that right here. Got a shaded area telling us a squeeze move is coming, so we'll be watching that. I still think we'll end up reaching that upper boundary, even if we pull back or even get a bigger pullback than the 9%. I still think we'll probably reach that upper boundary of the channel in the weekly time frame. Balance of power is still positive, reflecting the trend are still bullish. Or pardon me, reflecting momentum. The bars reflecting the trend are trying to flip here to orange, telling us we're either going sideways or possibly down. But again, we won't have the final print until we have the close. Again, trend signals remain bullish. So what I'm watching is, do we turn back up here with momentum and get a triple divergence right here? This other divergence gave us, again, the 9% sell-off. Do we see that happen, or do we see momentum go negative? Do we see the RSI start dropping below 50? Things like that. That would suggest a bigger sell-off. Right here is the impulse line. It has not turned bearish yet. That's still blue. It's a little hard to see because of the bar here, but it is still blue with today's bar. But if it starts to change, it could give us a pullback like we had over here at the 9%, or possibly start a reversal. So we're looking for clues, but again, still got a pretty good chance we're going to try to reach that upper channel line at some point, and again, it very well could be in December or January that we see that happen. And I told you I was looking for triple divergences on these oscillators. These divergences gave us the 9% sell-off right here. Again, going to be watching to see if that's it and oscillators all start going negative, or if it's not done yet, we still end up forming a larger divergence, which again, I think is very likely. But trend signals are still bullish here. We still have the cloud bullish, and again, we're coming back and testing our 20-period moving average. Bitcoin dropping about 3.5%. I'll be watching to see, do momentum signals flip bearish, and then if so, do trend signals start turning bearish? Or again, Do we just pull back a little bit and then go on up towards that upper channel line in the weekly time frame? So far with this pullback right here, so far momentum has not yet flipped. The trend is still bullish. I told you we needed to get above this cloud, and again, momentum is bullish with this ribbon, but we need to get above this cloud if we're going to go higher, and the cloud is still red, and we're struggling at it. Tried to get above it a couple times, moving above 100,000, but still have not been able to clear it. You got to be able to clear it if we're going to resume the advance. Critical mass line still bullish, still pointing up, and we're moving back towards it. So again, if we start losing that area and it starts turning red, that would be bearish. If we can see trend signals remain bullish, then you still got a chance at clearing that other resistance and going towards 115,000.